Hey everyone, today we're going to be adding projectiles to our ship so that we can shoot, and we're going to be adding some targets that we can shoot at. So to start out, we're going to be opening the flying BP and opening blueprints, and then we're going to start by adding, if you go here to right click blueprint class and hit actor, we're going to call this actor the projectile BP. So this is going to house all of the information that the blueprint needs and what it happens when it hits something. So we can open it up, and the first thing we need to do is add a collision. So for this collision, we're going to do a sphere, and then underneath it, we're going to add a static mesh. This static mesh can be anything you like. You can go back into Blender and create your own mesh, but for now, I am just going to do a material sphere, and it's a little bit smaller, it's a little bit bigger than the collision, so we can bring it down to about 0.5 maybe, and that's good. And then add a texture to it. We can do basic 4. It's got a nice little blue color to it. And then we're going to add another actor class, and this is going to be an asteroid. This will be our first target that we can shoot at, and so we're going to start it in here with the collision box, just like our projectile, and you want to make sure it is the root of the scene. Come back into our projectile, you can just drag that onto the root, and we've done the same in the asteroid, so we can add here another static mesh, and our static mesh, we're going to use, if you search for rock, we're going to use this rock. And first thing you notice is it's huge. So scale it down. 0.1 is too small. 0.2, 0.3, 0.3 seems to be just fine. It doesn't have to be perfect, but that'll do. So if we move on to the event graph, we can delete all these, and we're gonna do any damage. On the event of any damage, for now we're just going to destroy actor. And so if anything damages this, it's gonna get destroyed immediately. So we hit compile, and then we go back to our projectile blueprint, and on the event graph, we're going to go to event hit, and on the event that this hits anything, we're going to take the other actor, and we're going to hit double equal sign to equal object, and we just want to make sure this is not the owner, and so get owner, and the owner is going to be the character. So in case the projectile overlaps with your flying vehicle, it'll just ignore it. It won't do anything. So for here, we're going to type branch and hook that up. So if it's false, we're going to take this other actor and type damage, and we're going to apply damage under false. And then on the variable, we can make a new variable called damage and set it to float. So if you hit compile, we can give it 25 damage. So for now, that's fine. And we're going to need to add in here a projectile movement. So if you go to add component and find projectile movement, there we have it. And so we're going to want to give it a good balance speed. You don't need to worry about max speed, but initial speed, we need to set it to something like 10,000. That'll make sure that it is not slower than our spaceship in order to make sure that it goes forward and hits things. So save that, and then we're going to come to our flying pond blueprint, and we're going to need right here an input. Go to project settings, and hit input. And we're going to go for an action mapping this time. And so under action mapping, we're going to add fire. And then we can go ahead and add fire too for later on when we create a second type of projectile. But for now, we'll do that. We're going to put on the keyboard, we're going to make it spacebar. And on a controller, we are going to do gamepad. And we are going to do face button bottom. And so on an Xbox controller, that would be A, and on a PlayStation controller, that would be X. But those are your 4 buttons on the right, your face buttons. And there we go. Exit. And so here we can do input fire. So what we need to do from here now is spawn actor from class. We're going to do a projectile blueprint, and spawn transform is going to be related to your mesh. And you're going to get an error if you compile, but we will fix that in a second. And so we're going to come back to our flying mesh, content flying mesh, our spacecraft, and we're going to be adding those second sockets that I talked about. And so create a socket, turret left, and turret right. So we drag them up right side, put it kind of just anywhere here, and up, drag it out. If you come into the viewpoint and you're moving around and it's too fast, if you scroll down on your scroll wheel while holding right mouse button, it'll slow how fast you go. But we can just get the socket just about there. This one, oops, that's good. Make sure, I guess, it should not be touching the turret itself, so it can shoot from a little bit in front of it. You won't really be able to know the difference. So save that. Then we can go back into our flying pond blueprint. And you can see this is all because of what we've done here. Delete that for now and then recompile. Just make sure we don't compile before we finish. So do projectile again, and then our spawn transform is going to come from those sockets. So if we drag our mesh out and socket, get socket transform, and then we are going to use turret left. So you need to remember what these names are called, or it will not work. So that's the transform, and then we can just duplicate this. You select it all and hit Control W, it'll duplicate it, and then we can drag it out. So this is going to be turret R, and so that's going to spawn 2 actors right there. But if we open it up and see, it's kind of fast. It's also going down. In a space type game, you're not really going to have gravity. So come back into projectile movement, and we're just going to turn off gravity. You see here, projectile gravity scale. We can set that to 0. And they seemed a little slow. We can make that 12,000, and then so that is kind of better, but you see it is too fast, and I think I added an extra 0 there. So if we come back in projectile movement, yep, it is at 120,000 and not 12,000. So if we look again, we see that it is going pretty well. But another thing that we will notice is if you start picking up some speed, the projectiles are still going at that 12,000, but the max speed we're going is 4,000. And so on our projectile blueprint, we're going to want to do event begin play. And so this is when this is instanced into the game. This is going to happen. And so we're going to take projectile movement, get speed. We're going to do initial speed. And then we're going to create another variable, and this is going to be added speed. And this we're going to be instance editable and exposed on spawn. And so if we go into our flying pawn again and right click and refresh these nodes, we now have this added speed. And so this added speed we're going to take from our current forward speed. Refresh this one. Do the same. And then compile. So now we have this, and we're going to get it and add it to our initial speed. And then we're going to set our initial speed. So we have to set initial. And so now the speed that our player character is going to be added to the speed of the projectile. And so it's always going to be faster than how fast we're moving. And it makes sense because if you shoot something, it is going to take the speed alongside that you're going, especially in the vacuum of space. So next thing we need to do is, if we come down to apply damage, I already added this destroy actor, but you're going to want to destroy the actor afterwards. And then add this damage to the base damage of your apply damage and select damage type. And so if this damage is set to 0 and this isn't there, when we hit our target, it's not going to do anything because it's 0 damage. So it's not going to destroy the actor because although it is applying damage, it's applying 0. So if we come into our viewport and add an asteroid, we can scale it up a little bit to 15, and then hit play, and when we shoot it, we notice that nothing happens, and when we run into it, we go straight through it. Why is that? It's because we did not set up the collision. So the sphere automatically is set up to overlap, which means it won't stop it, it'll just overlap it. So we need to set it to block all dynamic. Compile. And then the same on our projectile. We need to come down and set it to block all dynamic. We also want to, after that, come back to custom, and we're going to change this to a physics body. And we're also going to ignore vehicles for now. So we need to come into our flying pawn blueprint, come to our box, and we're going to, this should be overlap all. We're going to hit block all and then hit custom, and we're going to make this a vehicle because it is a vehicle. Then our asteroid, we've already done that. Projectile. So that should be good. Make sure everything's compiled and hit play. So now when we shoot it, it gets destroyed. But you'll notice that it's every time you shoot, you're adjusting the plane, and that's because it's hitting this vehicle. And so that's because of this static mesh right here. We need to set this to no collision. And so this static mesh just doesn't do anything. And so hit compile, and now we can shoot and it destroys things. And so the next thing we can do that's kind of fun is on our asteroid. Right now it's just this asteroid. It's always set up straight up unless we change it in our viewport and change the size. But what we're going to want to do is scale it up a bit. And so if we go to the construction script, this is going to, anytime you move it around in the viewport or place it, this is going to run. So we kind of want to randomize the size of the sphere, the asteroid itself. So if we drag out the sphere, and do set scale. We're going to do set relative scale 3D and plug it in. And then we're going to drag this out too, and we're going to do set relative rotation. So not only are we going to randomize the size, we're going to randomize the rotation. So even though we're using the same asteroid, they're going to look a little different just because they're turned around a bit. So right here, we're going to get random. We're going to random float. We don't have to get anything. And so we're going to do it from a range. And so we already saw that 15 was pretty good. We can do a little smaller than that, probably 5, and then maybe 25. Nope, not 250, that would be huge. And then we can plug that straight into there. And then on our rotation, we're going to want to split these pins and do these individually. So we can Control W that, and then we're going to change this to 0, change it to 360 because there's 360 degrees in a circle, and then duplicate that. And now we plug these in and hit compile. And now if we go to our viewport, we see that as we move it, we get a different rock each time. Or it looks different each time. And so now we can just duplicate in the viewport, and we can have vastly different asteroids pretty easily. So what we can do now is, if you come in here, and we can just go ahead and delete these floors. We won't really be needing them. Delete these words. And now we can take these, once you get a couple, and duplicate that. Let's put them in chunks here and there. Now when we fly around, we have a bunch of different sized asteroids that we can shoot at and destroy. So now we're going to want them to move around a little bit and maybe spin. So the way we do that, go back into the asteroid blueprint, and we're going to add a component. This is going to be somewhere over here. It's going to be rotating movement. And we're just going to set this, is at 180, that's really fast. We're just going to set that to 1, maybe this to 2, and we'll do 4 on X. So now if you hit play, you see they're kind of moving around. They're just moving. It's a little nicer on the eyes. They're not stagnant, they're not staying still, but they're rotating around. And now what we want is for them to actually move in place, because although they kind of look like they're moving, they're just spinning. So if we add a projectile movement and initial speed, we can keep that as 0 for now. On the construction script, we can go ahead and grab a range, and then take this projectile movement, set initial speed, just like we did with the projectiles. And then we're going to get a random float. Probably 100 to 1,000 might be good. It might be too fast, but we just have to play with it and see. So yeah, that is too fast, but what we also notice is gravity. So once again, projectile movement. We don't need gravity, we're in space. So if we play now, see, there you go. And you will notice that if they hit something, they stop. So go in here, and should bounce, we want to click yes. And go ahead and put bounce angle affects friction. So we can do that, and then see that they'll bounce a bit, and they just kind of fly around. And so we can begin to kind of create a little space for us to play around in with this. You can start moving around these props in the viewport if you want to. We can move these out and just start creating a little arena that we can fly around and play in. So we have all this done. One last thing that we'll need to do for this video is on our projectiles. As they are now, if they do not hit anything, they will just keep on going forever. And as it stands right now, it won't really do too much damage to our GPU and our CPU, but if you play the game forever and you have a ton of projectiles going on forever and ever, it can eventually lead to less than optimal performance. So it's an easy fix. On begin play, we can take from the end of this and do a delay, and we can delay for 20 seconds and then destroy actor, and that'll make sure that we don't have too many projectiles flying around forever and ever. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you next time.